Hello chess friends and welcome to Qe7 chess channel, and welcome to a very special gameplay by the new Stockfish version, by the new Stockfish 14 engine against another top engine H6. This game is really incredible because we have again a romantic era gambit on the board. So far we have seen Stockfish 14 playing the King's Gambit, the Evans Gambit. We have also seen the fried liver attack by Stockfish 14, which was I think also a very cool and tactical game. Now it's time for the new gambit here played by Stockfish 14. We have now the Danish Gambit on the board. The Danish Gambit we have talked about is also a very sharp opening in which you give up also some pawns in the beginning, but in order to get a huge piece activity, and that's actually sort of a Stockfish 14 style. Stockfish loves to play now, I think, this old romantic era chess games. It's just really beautiful to see really the sharp openings, because sometimes, as I said also in my previous videos, we miss a little bit this sharp and tactical play. Sometimes the games are too pragmatic, too positional, and they reach many times this endgames, boring endgames sometimes. But these games which Stockfish 14 is playing now are really incredible, with immortal tactics all over the board. So let's check out now how Stockfish 14 played the Danish Gambit. So here e4, of course, by Stockfish. We have now e5 by this other engine h6. We have now d4. After e takes d4 and c3, we have now the Danish Gambit on the board. And again, I'm pointing out the main idea of any gambit is to reach something for the sacrifice pawn. Sometimes it can be a pawn center control, which means we can have maybe two centralized pawns. What the other important thing is of course the piece activity. And here this engine h6 plays a very interesting idea, plays this move queen to e7, and now Stockfish plays in this really gambit fashion, plays simply c takes d4, allows here black to take out the pawn to decoy the queen towards the center, because now okay, the queen has taken the pawn. It comes also with the tempo, but the queen in the center could be always of course attacked by some other minor piece activity. The queen becomes actually now a target of whites, so that's why okay, black took the pawn as we said, but at least white can gain some tempo against the queen. White can develop really in a fast way. So here bishop to e3, so far covering the e file. We have bishop to b4, so see h6 is also trying to play in a fast developing style. Here knight to c3, we have knight to f6, and now knight to f3 played also by Stockfish, and now knight to d5. Because you see, if you play castling, it seems also like a natural idea in chess to secure the king. The queen is out, the pieces are out. The problem is always, I think, you get this one bishop to d3, you can maybe retreat, and as we said, you see now with this setup, Stockfish has brought out all of the minor pieces into the game, and is simply only one move far away from castling. Now in the continuation, also an idea like rook to e1 I think would be played for sure here by Stockfish, with some discoveries, bishop to g5. And in my opinion, when Stockfish would maybe play this particular line, I think that Stockfish would always find a way to brutalize its opponents, because there are simply too many pieces of whites out. You see, black has still problems to develop the knight, the bishop, and also the rook into the game. Meanwhile, white is doing something. Meanwhile, white is developing the pieces, is placing them on the best squares on the board. So that's why, in my opinion, this is a great position here for white. So that's why after move knight to f3 here by Stockfish 14, this other engine h6 plays this move knight to d5, continues the pressure against the center. Here Stockfish has to play now queen to d2 in order to protect both pieces, in order to protect the c3 knight, but also the e3 bishop. In the continuation, we have bishop to c3, b takes c3, and now knight takes e3. We have now f takes e3, because if you play queen to e3, it simplifies the game simply too much for black. Black would love, I think, to play this continuation without the queens on the board, and with this extra pawn, of course, white is simply losing, I think, in this potential endgame. So that's why here f takes e3, we have now castling, and of course now bishop to d3. Again, I'm pointing out, at least now Stockfish has two pieces out, is also one move far away from castling, and will now in the continuation of the game will probably play simply the move e4. That's the main goal, to get these two pawns connected. So that's why first castling has to be played here by Stockfish. If you play e4 too early, then you could be challenged with d5 or with f5 moves, and I think then of course black has some opportunities to attack the position. So that's why castling played by Stockfish. And now in my opinion comes one of the critical moments of the games. Here this engine h6 plays the move d6, and in my opinion this is not the best of moves. My Stockfish engine at home also suggests another move which is, I think, more natural, which is the move d5. And this d5 move, okay, it creates also a little bit of a weakness because you don't want to have so many pawns on light squares when you have a light square bishop. So this bishop would be then so good. But in my opinion, d5 is really necessary to control the e4 square. You want to have a control of the e4 square because in at least in this continuation, of course, the white would have this long-term weakness, this backward pawn on e3. So that's why I think d5 is more accurate. Then you could maybe try here rook to e1 to protect your backward pawn, but I think with f5 we can paralyze here the position from black perspective. And now in the continuation of the game we would try some maneuvers like knight to d7, knight to f6, and then knight to e4. Then I think we could cement this knight on e4. This will be a powerful knight, and even if you take out the knight, then it simply opens the position on the f files too much. Then the bishop will come into the game here through this diagonal. So as I said, in my opinion, this kind of a stone wall setup would be perfectly fine here for black. It's almost like a stone wall Dutch setup, but in my opinion this is now more powerful because of the activity on the e file, the potential also activity on the e file, because in this particular continuation white is continuing the game with the backward pawn. So as I said here, e4 h6 allowed simply this great move for Stockfish. Now at least Stockfish has now this pawn central control. These two pawns are restricting these 4 squares on the board, on this either side of the board, so no minor piece activity for black here. And so far the bishop is good, the knight is centralized, and what we want to do now in the continuation of the game is of course activate the rook on the e file. And I think from this point on Stockfish has a comfortable game. Stockfish has a great setup for this of course sacrifice pawn. At least white has some kind of an activity. So here c5 played by h6, of course challenging the center is now necessary because black didn't play the move d5. Black didn't challenge so far the center with f5 move, so that's why c5. Here we have a rook to e1, and now we have h6. And I really don't understand this move. I'm not sure why black played this move, because h6 is obviously weakening the pawn structure in front of the king even further, because what obviously white wants to do is to create the so-called Capablanca attack. And we have talked about in one of my videos about the so-called Capablanca attack as an attacking theme in chess. Here's the link to the video. It's a basics in chess series video. If you want to study how to attack in positions, please check also out this video, how to create this Capablanca attack, what's the main tactical and strategical goal of this Capablanca attack. Now the idea is clear. What white wants to do is to play bishop to b1, queen to d3, the so-called Capablanca attack, or queen to c2, and then liberate this diagonal and deliver checkmate here on h7. And okay, you cannot do so much as black here against this idea of white, but what you can do afterwards is of course to play simply the move g6, which is of course somehow controlling this long diagonal. But you have to play g6, but you don't have to play h6. When you play h6, then you have weakened, I think, too much the pawn structure in front of the king. So that's why in my opinion this move h6 is an unnecessary move, and it's also valid as an inaccuracy here also by my Stockfish engine at home. So in my opinion, weakening the pawn structure so much in front of the king is simply not a good defensive idea here for black. So after move rook from a to e1, we have set h6 here played by black, and now comes bishop to b1. Here knight to c6 was played by this under engine h6. If you play even here the move bishop to g4 to maybe attack the knight, which is controlling here the d4 square, it's not even better. It's not such a powerful idea because white can break through now with the move e5. And as we said, when we have a great setup in chess, when we have all the pieces on the best squares, then it's simply time to open the position. You see, still black hasn't played with the knight, still black hasn't played with the rook. So in this particular scenario, e5 is a great idea. And look at this, even if black takes now bishop to f3, here we have this idea e6. We can break here through here immediately, because now if you even take, we can simply play queen to d3. This is a very annoying queen and bishop battery. And even if you for instance retreat with the bishop, then you get this one, you get e takes f7, and then the queen is also lost. So it's really wild. Again, this queen and bishop battery in the continuation is simply too much to handle. So you see, you don't have even time here after move the bishop to b1 to create here sort of a positional trade of pieces idea with the move bishop to g4 in order to maybe challenge the knight, which we said is controlling the d4 square. So that's why after move bishop to b1 here this other engine h6 plays the move knight to c6. We have now h3. Great pragmatic and prophylactic idea here by Stockfish 14. It's not now allowing here this, it's not a pin, but it's a idea to create the positional trades of pieces, because it's a simply battle for the d4 square. So that's why Stockfish is not allowing this move. Great prophylactic move by the fish. So here bishop to d7. Okay, black is developing further, but it's not the best piece simply for the bishop. Now king to h1, getting out of some maybe dark square attacks, so that's why the king is perfectly fine here. And here rook from a to e8, and now e5. It's really time now to break the position, and now comes again, I think, sort of a critical moment of the game. Here this other engine, h6, plays the move d5, and d5 is again not the best of moves. Here d takes e5, maybe slightly better. Okay, white can break through here with the move d5, then knight to b8 can be played. We can play now maybe from white's perspective move d6, the queen has to retreat, and now knight to e5 will happen. But again, queen to g5 would be a great idea here. Again, simplify the position, maybe queen to d3, but now it is protectable with the move g6. Maybe white can try knight to f3, but now with queen to g3, I think black has solved all of the position problems, because you cannot move the knight. If you do that, then again black simplifies the game by trading off more pieces, which would be, I think, a great defensive idea here for black. Black would solve in this particular continuation all of the positional problems. So in my opinion here, d takes e5 was a possibility to simply play like this, but this other engine, h6, plays now the move d5, and d5 causes now many problems, because what white is still here is the space advantage. The knight is out of game. The bishop, okay, is controlling this long diagonal, but it doesn't have a great activity. When we watch now where the bishop can come, it can only come here to e6, so it doesn't have a great activity. Still, this idea, the queen and bishop battery, this Capablanca attack, is still a great tactical possibility here for white. So here in the game, knight to g1. Knight to g1 is a brilliant maneuver here by the knight, because what we want to do, as we said, is to play queen to c2 or queen to d3, but now the only way to defend this position is with the move g6. But now what Stockfish has in mind is to play knight to e2, then knight to f4, and maybe here sort of a sacrifice around the square g6, or maybe even some tactical ideas around the square f7. So what Stockfish is trying here is continue the pressure simply somehow here around the square g6. That's why this maneuver is great here. Great positional and tactical idea by the fish. So here queen to g5. Again, black is trying to simplify the game by trading off more pieces, which Stockfish is of course not allowing. Stockfish plays now simple threat idea, queen to b2, attacking the opponent b7, b6 has to be played. Now we're attacking again the h7 square with again simple threat idea, trying to deliver checkmate. So that's why g6. And now when we have weakened more the position of blacks, now it's time to protect the position with the move queen to f2. So see, sometimes I think let's see this position. So we get challenged maybe here by the queen. Some of us, I think, and most of us would simply play the move queen to f2, but that would be inaccurate, because Stockfish first, as we said, creates weaknesses. B6 weakness, now another weakness, g6 weakness, and now it's time to play queen to f2 to protect the pawn on d4 like this. Really beautiful chess here by the Stockfish engine. So c takes d4, nothing dramatically has changed. Still white has this dominant position in the center. Rook to c8, we have now king to h2, h5, and now h4, kicking away further the queen, because there is one problem now for black. Black cannot play the move queen to g4. It seemed to me at least in the beginning that it would be a perfect move, that you're attacking more pawns, that you're forcing basically your opponent something to do, but actually it's not so, because here knight to e2 is protecting first of all this pawn on d4, but now in the potential continuation maybe bishop to e6, trying to cement the position further. Now comes the stunner, queen to f6 would be a great move, because the problem is now you cannot actually take out this pawn. You get simply this idea. Rook to f4 is always a tactical threat here for black. Black's queen gets trapped, so it's simply game over. So as I said, after move h4, you cannot bring your queen to g4. That's now a huge problem, because the queen has to now retreat again on a passive square. The queen has to retreat now on the e7 square, which is not of course the best square now for the queen. So here knight to e2, as we said, the main goal is to get this queen somewhere here, maybe this queen and bishop better, but now the knight on f4 move is the main attacking move, simply targeting the g6 square. So really beautiful attacking setup. So And we have here knight, bishop to g4, knight to f4, queen to d7, queen to d2. Again, with some ideas, maybe even to play the queen to d3 move in long terms. We have now knight to e7. We have rook to f2. Of course, what Stockfish is doing is now simply creating this rook battery on the f file, because when we are on the attacking side, we always ask ourselves this question: which piece can be improved? When we watch now, the knight is good. Maybe the queen needs a little bit improvement here. The bishop is also very cool. So that's why the only pieces that need improvement, I think, is this rook on e1, and in order to improve it, you have to create now a very nice battery. So when you don't know what to do when you're on the attacking side, first evaluate the strength of your pieces. So always ask yourselves the question: which piece can be improved? Where is maybe a better square for the piece that's simply bad on the board? So here, after move knight to e7, we have rook to f2, queen to c7, and now this brilliant battery, because there is one problem here. After move queen to g7 and knight to d3, the problem is now you cannot cut off here the f file by playing some bishop to f5 or knight to f5 moves, because you get simply tactic here. We have here the possibility to play rook to f5, so you cannot protect the position like this. We can sacrifice even 2 rooks here, which is really wild. After g takes f5, we would simply come here with the queen very active into the game. King to h8, a couple of checks will happen, then knight to f4. You see, you can maybe try to trade off the queens again, but again, queen to h6 is happening. King to g8, we can now include the bishop into the game, so it's simply losing. You can maybe try some ideas, but then queen to h7 is simply game over. So you see how powerful this rook battery on the f file is. So after move knight to d3, that's why here knight to g8 played by this other engine h6. At least here black brought some pieces into the defense. Here the knight on g8, it's at least trying for a while to protect black's king, but it again a great new move by Stockfish. Queen to g5, and even if you try some other ideas, even if you try maybe queen to c3, it's not so good, because you get again simply queen to g5. The queen will come into the game. Then ideas are something to play knight to f4 again with e6 idea, then knight takes e6, then the bishops are coming into the game, so too much pressure here simply around the light square. So after move knight to d3, we have now knight to g8, queen to g4, queen to g5, we have now a5, and now a brilliant move again played by Stockfish. We have rook to f6. Look how this rook comes into the game, because the problem is now you cannot take. If you take now, knight takes f6, okay, you cannot take with the pawn because of this pin by the queen against the king, but you can take out with the rook. And again, there is simply too much pressure. Knight to f4 will happen. All of these pieces are targeting here the g6 square. So now in the continuation, you could try maybe queen to c3, knight to f4 will happen. You can maybe take out this one, but now rook to g6 is simply winning the game. F takes g6, queen to g6, and now here queen to h7 is the brilliant checkmate. So here, that's why after rook to f6, this other engine h6 protects this position with rook to e8. Is trying to get again new pieces into the defense, but here again this move knight to f4, we have knight to f6, we have now e takes f6, and now after king to h7, you have to play king to h7. If you play another move, then you get checkmated, because queen to h6 will happen. That's the main issue. So you have left the defense here of the h6 square. The queen will sneak in, and you get checkmated here on g7. So that's why you have to play king to h7, but you're getting here simply on this diagonal where already the bishop is. Really great tactics here by Stockfish. So that's why we have now king to g1, we have rook to g8, and now knight to h5, because if you take now here bishop to h5, then you get queen to h5, a beautiful checkmate. You cannot take, of course, because of this bishop's activity. So here after move knight to h5, we have queen to d7. Now we have a knight to g3, maneuvering the knight. What we want to now do now is, of course, continue the pressure here with the move h5. So that's why king to rook to h8, trying to protect this position, but now king to h2. Also, knight to f5 was a possibility here for Stockfish. If you take bishop to f5, then bishop to f5, you can maybe retreat with the queen to b5, but now h5 is happening, and again, you're tactically simply lost. So, okay, Stockfish tried here a different idea. We have king to h2, we have a rook to e2, and now rook to f4, simply attacking the bishop twice. In the continuation of the game, we have a rook to e1, attacking the bishop, and now comes the standard. Maybe you can pause the video now and try to see now the best continuation here for white. Maybe you can find now a great tactics which actually wins the game. It's not a tactic in which you're winning the game by delivering a checkmate, but I think it's a brilliant move. It gives you here a huge advantage. Pause the video and said, and try to solve now this chess puzzle. Okay, we can play now, of course, bishop to g6, here f takes g6, now rook to g6, but it comes with the direct attack against this g6 weakness. If you play now here rook to g8 in order to protect this position, this is the problem. You get here h5. If you take now, of course, we'll simply take out the queen, takes, and here it's actually checkmate. So what here this other engine h6 played is, of course, queen to f7, protecting this position like this, but still knight to f5, a brilliant move here again by Stockfish 14. Here g takes f5 was played, but now queen to f5, first to check, king to h6, we have now queen to g5, again king to h7, we have now a new check, here rook king to h6, but now queen to f4. The problem is now if you get your king here, then you get checkmated. That's the main issue, so you have to bring your king again to h7, but now comes rook to g7, you have to give up the queen. We have now f takes g7, and you cannot take again king to g7 because you get queen to g3, you lose the rook, so that's why you have to play rook to g8, but now queen to f5, we have king takes g7, and now Stockfish 14 grabs another pawn, and this is now a completely winning endgame with these two extra pawns here on the king side. These pawns are marching, and it's simply game over. But okay, still this is an endgame. This endgame has to be proven. Let's see now what happened. We have rook to e8, queen to g5, king to f7, now check, simply pushing the pawns further. Queen to d5, we have rook to f6, now simply pushing again the pawns further. We have rook to e6, we have king to g3. Of course, the king has to play also actively in the endgame. Of course, you're getting checked a couple of times, but it's not such a huge problem. You can always hide behind your pawns. It's simply time to push them further. One of these rooks, the main idea in this types of endgames is to deflect one of these rooks so far away from the king that you can always try maybe some double attacks, maybe a check, and the rook is somewhere here, and then you can trap the rook. So as I said, the position gets more and more stretched. The rooks are not connected anymore because they have to protect this position by delivering some checks. Meanwhile, of course, white is doing something. White is pushing the pawn. So as I said, the position will get simply too much stretched for these rooks, and sometimes they can be an object of white attack, an object of a potential double attack. So here queen to b7, king to d8, we have g5, g6, rook takes d4, not a problem. Simply the king goes towards the center. We have rook to d1, g7, rook to g1, king to h6, hiding here, rook to f6, king to h7, king to g4, here a promotion of the new queen, rook takes g8, king takes g8, and here after move rook to d6. In this position, this engine h6 resigned. So brilliant attack again played by the fish in such a beautiful gambit like the Danish Gambit. So as I said, we have covered many great games now in the Danish Gambit. So if you want to study the sharp opening more, here's the link of our whole playlist, and I hope that you enjoyed this game. If you want to see also some other beautiful attacks like this, check out my commented chess games played by computers. Here's also the link to our series, and if you want to see humans battling it out in their best chess games, check out my best chess games of all time series with some great games from the past and also some great present games. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.